Chapter 14. The security system in Mikhail's secondary residence required a retinal scan, thumbprint, and 6-digit code, none of which Isabella possessed. She'd been standing outside the sleek door of his penthouse for 5 minutes, alternating between ringing the bell and sending increasingly frustrated texts to a phone that was probably still lying on the bathroom floor where they'd left it. The corridor was eerily silent except for the soft hum of the building's ventilation system and the impatient tap of her foot against the marble floor. "Come on," she muttered, knuckles rapping on the door for the 4th time. The sound echoed off the pristine walls unnervingly loud. "I know you can hear me with your supernatural wolf hearing." The marble hallway carried her voice in echoing whispers. The recessed lighting cast her shadow strangely and elongated against the opposite wall. As she raised her hand to knock again, the door swung open. Mikhail Volkov stood in the threshold barefoot and shirtless, wearing only black sweatpants that hung low on his hips. The wounds that had been gaping, silver-infected gashes that morning were now silvery scars across his chest and abdomen. Despite his recent injuries, he carried himself with the same dangerous grace she'd first noted at the gala, the controlled movements of something not entirely human. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through Isabella's chest. His scent washed over her, pine, earth, and lupine. Though human blue, now rather than supernatural red, his eyes held the same intensity that had first drawn her attention across a crowded ballroom. Despite his words, he stepped back, making space for her to enter. Isabella brushed past him, trying to ignore the heat radiating from his body and the earthy masculine scent that seemed to cloud her usually sharp thought processes. Her shoulder touched his bare chest briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through her system. She removed her coat, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after the past 24 hours. The apartment looked different in the evening light, sleeker, more dangerous. The minimalist furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows gave it the feeling of an observation post rather than a home. The city of Atlanta spread below them, buildings catching the last golden rays of sunlight, while shadows lengthened in the streets. Medical supplies were scattered across the glass coffee table, gauze, strange-smelling herbal pastes, empty blood bags. The room smelled of antiseptic, overlaid with something earthy and primitive. Isabella gestured to the mess. "You've been busy," she observed, removing her coat and draping it on an elegant postmodern chair. The leather made a soft sound as it settled. She tried to maintain her professional tone despite the surreal circumstances. Mikhail closed and locked the door, each movement deliberate and controlled. The locks engaged with multiple electronic beeps, a fortress in the sky. "Lichen healing? Accelerated by proper nutrition?" He nodded toward the empty blood bags, a hint of dark humor in his tone. The last rays of sunset caught his profile, turning him momentarily into a golden silhouette against the darkening sky. "That's..." Isabella struggled to find the appropriate word. "Convenient. Blood helped them to heal?" She wondered if that could be why Victor was draining his victims. She crossed her arms, uncomfortable with how quickly she was adjusting to the impossible. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed a woman she barely recognized, hair disheveled, clothes rumpled, eyes too wide. "It has its advantages," he agreed, moving to the kitchen area where a kettle was just beginning to whistle. The shrill sound cut through the tension in the room. though silver poisoning complicates things. It slows the healing process, makes it more painful. He poured hot water into 2 waiting mugs with the unconscious grace of old wealth and privilege. Steam rose between them, fragrant with herbs. Tea! The domesticity of the gesture seemed absurd given the circumstances. Isabella almost laughed, but caught herself. Sure. Why not have tea with the werewolf? The surreality of her situation hit her anew. Standing in a luxury penthouse, accepting tea from a supernatural creature as though they were discussing the weather rather than monsters and murders. The city lights were beginning to blink on below them. A carpet of stars brought down to earth. A hint of a smile played at Mikhail's lips as he added honey to 1 mug before bringing them both over. The scent of chamomile and something more exotic, something she couldn't identify, wafted up from the steaming cups. He handed her the sweetened one. You take honey, no milk. Correct. The gesture was casual, but the observation was intimate. Isabella stared at him. How could you possibly know that? She accepted the mug, their fingers brushing briefly. His skin still unnaturally warm. The contact sent another jolt through her system. Unwelcome, but undeniable. You made yourself a cup yesterday, he said simply, lowering himself onto the couch with a barely perceptible wince. I pay attention. The leather couch creaked softly as he settled, a surprisingly typical sound from a being who was anything but normal. She remained standing, unsettled by his recall of such a minor detail. The mug warmed her hands, the heat seeping into her bones after the chill of fear that had been her constant companion since the warehouse. Mikhail's ice-blue eyes fixed on hers. I remember everything about you, Isabella Santos. Your scent, heartbeat, and the shade of brown your eyes turn when you're angry or afraid. He sipped his tea, his gaze never leaving her face. The steam rose between them, creating a momentary veil. Right now, there's somewhere in between. His words were delivered with quiet intensity rather than as a threat, but they sent a shiver down her spine. Isabella remained standing, clutching her mug like a shield. I found a blood paw print on my pillow. Her voice was clipped, prosecutor sharp, pushing past the unsettling intimacy of his observation. The memory of the violation made her skin crawl anew. Mikhail's demeanor shifted instantly. The casual grace vanished, replaced by tightly coiled tension. He set his mug down with a sharp clink, his body suddenly radiating a predatory alertness that reminded her forcefully of what he truly was. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with something primal. Victor, he growled, the name sounding like a curse. His fingers curled into a fist, knuckles white. When? The single word contained volumes of controlled rage. Likely while I was here with you, before Katerina had a chance to put a guard in place. As angry as he looked, he didn't want him unfairly blaming his head of security. Isabella pulled out her phone, showing him the photo she'd taken of the print. The bloody smear gleamed wetly in the image, obscenely vivid. He went through my things, moved objects around. A message to let me know he can get to me when he wants. She maintained her clinical tone, despite the violation she still felt. Mikhail stood in one fluid motion, seemingly oblivious to his injuries now. The movement was too quick and too smooth to be entirely human. You can't go back there, he stated flatly. It's not safe. His tone brooked no argument, accustomed to command. I'm not abandoning my home because some psychotic werewolf is trying to intimidate me, Isabella countered, steel entering her voice. She squared her shoulders, chin lifting in defiance. The tea's warmth seemed suddenly insufficient against the chill of fear. I want answers, not protection. Who exactly is Victor Aldrich? And what does he want with me? Mikhail paced the length of the living room, his reflection ghosting across the darkening cityscape beyond. The movement reminded Isabella of a caged predator. Each step was silent despite his size, another subtle reminder of his inhuman nature. The muscles of his bare torso flexed with each movement, and his healing wounds were an angry roadmap engraved across his skin. Victor is my father's brother, the former alpha of the Atlanta Pack, he began, each word precise and controlled. 18 years ago, I challenged him for leadership after discovering he'd been killing humans for sport. It's one of our oldest laws. We do not prey on humans. His accent, which usually lay dormant beneath perfect American English, became more pronounced as emotion colored his voice. The city's lights behind him emphasized his otherness, a being apart from the human world below. How magnanimous, Isabella murmured, but her tone had less bite than earlier that morning. She moved to the window. Night was falling rapidly, shadows deepening in the corners of the penthouse. The city below took on a different character after dark, more mysterious, more dangerous, its secrets better hidden. Mikhail shot her a look that was half amusement, half warning. It's not morality, it's survival. Humans outnumber us thousands to one. History has taught our kind that exposure leads to extinction. There was something ancient in his voice, a weight of experience that belied his apparent age. The city lights reflected in his eyes, making them glow momentarily. So, you overthrew him because he was risking exposure, not because killing is wrong? Isabella pressed, her sense of justice rebelling against his pragmatic explanation. The cool glass of the window felt solid and real against her fingertips, an anchor to normality in this unreal conversation. I overthrew him because he was a sadistic son of a bitch who enjoyed causing pain. Mikhail corrected, a flash of red illuminating his eyes momentarily. The slip revealed the depth of emotion beneath his controlled exterior. The risk of exposure was the justification the pack needed to support my challenge. Politics, he added humorlessly, exist in every society. Isabella set her untouched tea down and moved closer to him, her instincts taking over. What happened during this challenge? She studied his face, looking for tells, for deception, approaching him as she would a witness. I won. Barely. Mikhail's hand unconsciously moved to a silvery scar near his heart that hadn't healed like the fresh wounds. His fingers traced the old injury with a distant expression. Victor had ruled for decades. He was stronger, more vicious, and crazy. But I was younger, faster. His expression darkened. I should have killed him, but I showed mercy. Banished him instead of executing him, as was my right. And now he's back, killing again, Isabella concluded. Why now? Why these specific victims? She was building a case in her mind, her legal training unable to rest even in these extraordinary circumstances. The increasing darkness of the room seemed to mirror the darkening nature of their conversation. Mikhail turned to face her. Because I took something from him. Power, status, control. Now he's taking things from me. The victims were under my protection in various ways. The first was the daughter of my pack's oldest human ally. The second person I worked with was someone in my daily life who worked catering gigs occasionally at the hotel. His voice held the edge of a growl, barely contained fury simmering beneath civilized words. Its rumble seemed to vibrate in the air between them. He's targeting people connected to you, Isabella realized. A cold weight settled in her stomach. Which is why he's watching Damon. And why did he break into my apartment? Her hand came up unconsciously to her throat, where the victim's claw marks would have been. She could almost feel phantom pain there. The ghost of a wound that might yet become real. Mikhail moved toward her with that unnatural, fluid grace. Yes, he said softly. He's targeting you because I've shown interest in you. I did you no favors when I defended you last night. The heat of his body seemed to reach her, even with his feet still between them. Despite his proximity, Isabella refused to back away, tilting her head up to maintain eye contact. So now I'm a pawn in some supernatural power struggle? Collateral damage in your family feud? Her voice was steady, despite the hammering of her heart, which she knew he could probably hear. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she stared him down. No. Mikhail's voice dropped lower, the single syllable vibrating with intensity. You became a target the moment you started investigating the murders. Victor doesn't leave witnesses ever. Your connection to me made you more valuable to him as a target. His hand came up, hovering near her face without touching, as though restraining himself. She could feel the heat radiating from his palm. He was standing so close now that Isabella could see the subtle flecks of silver in his storm blue irises. Her heart hammered against her ribs in a reaction that wasn't entirely fearful. The scent of him filled her nostrils, clouding her thoughts. Something primal and unwelcome stirred within her. An attraction she'd been fighting since their first meeting, now complicated by the knowledge of what he truly was. Why did you protect me then? She challenged. If I were already investigating, already a liability to your precious secrecy, why not let him kill me? She held her ground despite their proximity, refusing to be intimidated. The night had fully descended, the penthouse illuminated only by city lights through the windows and a single lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the floor. Mikhail's expression softened, vulnerability flickering across his features before disappearing behind his customary control. Because you're extraordinary, he said simply. Fearless, righteous. Because you care about justice more than self-preservation. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because the thought of his claws across your throat made me want to tear the world apart. The raw honesty in his voice sent a surge of adrenaline spiraling through Isabella's core. She was acutely aware of his partial nakedness, of the lean muscle rippling beneath tan skin just inches away, of the primal intensity radiating from him like a physical force. She found herself staring at the curve of his lips, the substantial column of his throat, before forcing her gaze back to his eyes. The air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. I don't know what to do with any of this, she admitted, voice equally soft. Her usual composure cracked, revealing the overwhelmed woman beneath the prosecutor's facade. Werewolves, supernatural power struggles. Everything I've built my life around, evidence, logic, the law seems inadequate. And yet, you came back here, Mikhail observed, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely grazing her skin. The simple touch sent electricity through her, raising goosebumps along her neck. You could have run, reported everything to your police detective friend. Instead, you returned to the monster's den. Isabella shivered at his touch. Harper's been investigating you, she informed him, attempting to regain professional footing. He went to your penthouse at the hotel. Her voice sounded breathless, even to her ears. I'm aware, Mikhail said, seemingly unconcerned. It's being handled. He withdrew his hand, but remained close, his presence a palpable physical force. The shadows lengthened around them as the night deepened, the city below transforming into a tapestry of lights against darkness. Handled? What does that mean? She frowned, her concern for Harper surfacing. The chill of the window glass against her back reminded her of her vulnerability, caught between the night beyond and the predator before her. It means there are members of my pack in every level of Atlanta's institutions. Police, government, medical. A necessary precaution for our survival. He delivered this bombshell with the casual confidence of old power, of systems long in place. Isabella stepped back, eyes widening. You've infiltrated law enforcement, the government. The DA in her recoiled at the implications, at the corruption of systems she had devoted her life to upholding. Was that why Rogers had ordered her to back off investigating Mikhail? Was he compromised? She backed toward the window behind her, the solid barrier of the window contrasting with the suddenly shifting ground beneath her moral footing. We haven't infiltrated anything, Mikhail corrected, a hint of impatience coloring his tone. We've been part of this city since before it was a city. Some of us choose to serve in public roles. It allows us to monitor for threats and contain exposure when necessary. His chin lifted slightly. An aristocratic pride in his lineage was evident. He seemed suddenly older, a creature who had witnessed the passing of decades that would consume a human lifetime. That's corruption, Isabella insisted, indignation flaring. Manipulating evidence, obstructing investigations. Her hands gesticulated to emphasize her point. That's survival, Mikhail countered, moving toward her again, backing her slowly against the floor-to-ceiling window. His movements were deliberate, predatory. Your human justice system wasn't designed for supernatural crimes, Isabella. What jury would convict a lichen? What prison could hold one? The city's lights behind them cast strange shadows across his face, emphasizing the inhuman perfection of his features. The cool glass pressed against her back as Mikhail placed one hand on the window beside her head, effectively caging her with his body without actually touching her. The city sprawled below them, a carpet of lights in the darkness. His scent surrounded her, his heat a palpable thing in the cool air of the penthouse. She could feel her heart racing, the prehistoric part of her brain recognizing the presence of a predator, while another part responded in a way that had nothing to do with fear. You operate outside the law, she said, but her voice had less conviction now. Her breath came faster, her body responding to his proximity in ways her mind wanted to deny. The night deepened around them, the darkness emphasizing the otherworldly blue of his eyes. I operate according to laws much older than yours, he murmured, face inches from hers. Laws that have kept our species in balance for millennia. His eyes dropped to her lips before meeting her gaze again. Isabella's breath quickened. She should be terrified, trapped between a window and a predator, 60 floors above the ground. She should be morally outraged at the admission of institutional manipulation. Instead, she found herself drawn toward him, toward his dangerous heat. Her body betrayed her, leaning slightly into his space, though her mind still fought for rational distance. "Why am I even listening to you?" she whispered. "You're the prime suspect in my case." The words were a reminder to herself as much as to him. The window felt cool against her back. His body radiated heat before her, caught between two extremes just as her mind was caught between suspicion and attraction. "Am I?" His lips curved in a knowing smile. "Or am I the only one who can help you catch the real killer? The only one who can protect what you care about?" His voice had dropped lower, rumbling in his chest. She could almost feel its vibration in her ribcage. Isabella's analytical mind raced through the evidence, the witness testimony, the transformations she'd seen with her own eyes. "Victor Aldrich is killing people to punish you," she said slowly, "and to draw you out." The realization brought clarity, a momentary island of logic in a sea of confusion and forbidden attraction. Yes. Mikhail's confirmation was a breath against her skin, warm and intimate. And he's targeting me because I'm investigating the murders, and because he thinks I matter to you. Her voice had grown softer, intimate in the small space between them. The city hummed below, distant and irrelevant to the tension building in this small pocket of space between woman and wolf. Yes. Mikhail's voice roughened on the word, his eyes darkening as they dropped again to her lips. The single syllable contained undercurrents of emotion she couldn't fully decipher. His hand still rested on the window beside her head, the other hovering near her waist without touching. The tension between them built like an electrical charge, making the air thick and heavy with potential. Isabella knew she was standing on a precipice. One step would take her into territory from which there was no return. Her body pressed against the cool glass, his warmth before her, a physical manifestation of the choice she faced. She chose her following words carefully. "Do I matter to you?" The question emerged vulnerably, honestly, stripped of her usual courtroom armor. The darkness around them intensified the moment, creating an intimacy that daylight would have dispelled. Mikhail was suddenly inches from her face, his body still not quite touching hers, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You should leave now," he whispered, eyes flashing red momentarily. "Because in about 10 seconds, I won't stop myself from showing you exactly what it means to be wanted by a wolf." His hand hovered near her face, not quite touching. The restraint visible in every taut line of his body spoke volumes about the effort it cost him. The city lights behind them created a halo effect, dangerous and beautiful. Isabella held his gaze, heart thundering in her chest so loudly she was sure he could hear it. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings. He was a suspect, a werewolf, dangerous beyond imagination. But another part, a primal part she rarely acknowledged, recognized the truth in his barely leashed control, in the raw vulnerability beneath his power. The window glass was cold against her back, a reminder of how high above the everyday world they stood. The choice was still hers. She knew with absolute certainty that despite his predatory nature, despite the red eyes and the barely contained violence of his being, Mikhail Volkov would let her walk away this moment if she chose to. More than anything, the knowledge of that choice made her decision clear. "I should," she agreed, her voice barely audible. But I don't want to. Her confession hung between them, an invitation and a surrender. Mikhail's eyes flared the red of his wolf for a moment before returning to grey-blue. His hand finally made contact, fingers tracing her jawline with exquisite gentleness that belied the power she knew he possessed. His skin was fever-hot against her cheek, the contrast with the cool window glass behind her heightening every sensation. "Isabella," he whispered, her name a question and a prayer on his lips. Her hand came up to cover his, holding it against her cheek. "I know what you are," she said softly. "I've seen what you can do. I should be terrified." The admission felt like another step across that invisible threshold, another barrier falling between them. "You should," he agreed, his thumb brushing her lower lip. The gentle touch sent shivers down her body. "But you're not, are you? You've never run from anything in your life." "Maybe I should start," she breathed, the words barely escaping before his mouth claimed hers. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision, a desperate claiming honed over centuries of restraint finally snapping. The raw power she'd sensed simmering beneath his skin surged forward, channeled into the kiss. His lips were firm, demanding, and he tasted exotic tea and something wilder and darker. His other hand slammed against the glass beside her head, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. He deepened the kiss, tongue sweeping into her mouth. A possessive invasion that mirrored the way he'd invaded her thoughts, her investigation, her life. Isabella met his intensity with a hunger that shocked her. Her hand slid up his bare chest, fingers tangling in the surprisingly soft hair, tracing the hard planes of muscle and the faint ridges of his healing scars. She felt the thrum of his heart beneath her palm, a powerful, rapid beat that resonated with the frantic pulse in her veins. The cool glass at her back, the heat of his body pressing against hers, and the dizzying height fused into a sensory overload that obliterated rational thought. A low growl rumbled in Mikhail's chest, a primal sound of approval, of need. His mouth left hers to trail fire along her jawline, down the sensitive column of her throat. Isabella gasped, head tipping back, exposing more of her skin to his scorching touch. His teeth grazed the pulse point there, a possessive mark that sent jolts of electricity straight to her core. "Mikhail!" she gasped, a plea and a surrender. His control shattered completely. With a muttered curse that sounded more like reverence than anger, his hands went to the buttons of her silk blouse. Fabric ripped under his impatient fingers, buttons scattering like forgotten worries onto the polished floor. He pushed the ruined silk aside, exposing the delicate lace of her bra. His eyes blazing now with an intensity that bordered on electric, devoured the sight of her. Isabella didn't flinch. Fueled by a recklessness she didn't recognize, her hands went to the waistband of his sweatpants. The drawstring gave way easily, and she pushed the soft fabric down his muscled hips, her knuckles brushing against hard flesh and hot skin. He kicked them away impatiently, standing before her completely naked, magnificent and terrifying in his power. The city lights bathed his sculpted form, highlighting every ridge of his form, every ancient scar. He reached for her, his fingers gentle, despite the urgency radiating from every pore. He unclasped her bra with unhurried skill, allowing the thin straps to slide from her shoulders. The garment fell away, baring her breasts to his hungry gaze. With a growl that seemed to vibrate through her entire body, he cupped her, thumbs circling her taut nipples. Isabella cried out, her head falling back as pleasure coursed through her. She arched toward him, her breath coming in shallow pants. "Mikhail!" she gasped, her knees weak. But he held her firmly, his arm a band of steel around her waist, keeping her pinned against the window. The glass was shockingly cold against her bare skin, contrasting with the molten heat radiating from his body. He lifted her effortlessly, cradling her buttocks in one arm, the other hand sliding down to cup her intimately. The delicate fabric of her panties was no obstacle. With a sharp tug, he ripped them away, bearing her to his gaze and his touch. Her silk skirt slid up her thighs as he positioned her, her legs wrapping around his waist, pulling him impossibly closer. She was keenly aware of the height, the cool glass, the strength of his arms as he held her suspended. His fingers found her slick center, sliding easily into her folds. One digit teased her entrance, while another circled her clit, stroking and probing with exquisite precision. Isabella's hips bucked wildly, her breath coming in short gasps as he slowly pushed one, then two fingers deep inside her. The city lights twinkled below, distant and oblivious to the passionate drama unfolding in the penthouse. Reflections danced on the glass, their bodies entwined, a tapestry of desire and need. Isabella moaned, her hands clutching at his shoulders, her nails digging into his skin. "Please," she whispered, unsure what she was begging for, but unable to form coherent thoughts. Mikhail's mouth found hers again, his kiss as demanding as his fingers. With each thrust of his fingers, he seemed to steal her breath, each caress building the coil of tension in her core tighter and tighter. "You're beautiful like this," he murmured against her lips, his thumb never ceasing its relentless circles. "Open for me, Isabella. Come for me." His words sent her spiraling over the edge. Isabella cried out, her body convulsing around his fingers as pleasure washed over her in waves. Her vision sparkled with pinpricks of light, the city below blurred as she succumbed to the exquisite release. Mikhail held her through it all, his mouth on her neck, her shoulder, tasting her as her body trembled in the aftermath. As the last tremors faded, he slowly withdrew his fingers. Isabella's entire body still felt floating somewhere in the night sky. She was grateful that he continued to hold her. Mikhail's eyes shone with a lupine glow as he regarded her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "The first of many," he promised, his voice thick with desire. Isabella blew a strand of hair out of her face and grinned at him sheepishly. She could feel the rock-hard length of him pressed against the inside of her thigh. While the orgasm had been lovely, it had done nothing to take the edge off her desire for him. If anything, it made her want him more, and she wasn't in the mood to play coy. "I don't suppose I could collect on one of those right now?" she asked huskily. Mikhail needed no further encouragement. He entered her with one powerful, smooth thrust, burying himself deep inside. Isabella gasped, clinging to his shoulders, the sheer intensity of the sensation stealing her breath. He filled her, stretching her, claiming her in the most primal way possible. The window behind her vibrated faintly with the force of their connection. Mikhail froze momentarily, his forehead pressed against hers, eyes closed, his breath coming in harsh pants. "Isabella," he groaned, the sound thick with centuries of buried need. Then he began to move, slowly at first, then building an ancient and urgent rhythm. Each thrust pressed her back against the cool glass, the sensation alternating between the shocking cold and the searing heat of his body joined with hers. The city lights blurred below, streaks of color against the darkness. Her hands clenched on his shoulders, nails digging slightly into his skin. But he didn't seem to notice, lost in the driving rhythm. Sounds filled the penthouse. Her gasps, his low growls, the slap of skin against skin, the faint creak of the window under their combined weight. It was raw, elemental, a mating under the indifferent gaze of the city. She met his thrusts, arching her back, driven by a need that eclipsed fear, reason, and the case she was supposed to be building against a serial murderer. He stepped back from the window and tilted her head back, forcing her to look at the dizzying view, their reflections superimposed over the skyline. "Look," he commanded, his voice rough. "See us." She saw them, a woman and a predator, human and ancient wolf, entwined against the glass 60 stories above the world. The sight was erotic, terrifying, utterly consuming. The reflection, the height, the forbidden nature of it all, pushed her closer to the edge. He drove into her harder, faster, his hips slamming against hers relentlessly. Her climax ripped through her, a blinding wave of sensation that made her cry out his name, her body convulsing around him. Her release triggered his own. With a final deep thrust and a guttural roar that echoed the wolf within, Mikhail poured his strength, his essence into her, his body shuddering violently against hers. For a long moment, they both leaned against the glass, their chests heaving and slick skin clinging together. Their only sounds were their ragged breaths and the distant hum of the city below. Mikhail drew a deep, steadying breath, the primal intensity in his eyes softening as he gathered his senses. Carefully, he eased her legs from around his waist and shifted his grip, so he was cradling her to his chest as if she weighed nothing. He carried her away from the cold window glass, his steps silent on the floor, and gently laid her down on the deep leather couch. Reaching for a cashmere throw nearby, he wrapped the soft blanket around her, cocooning her against the sudden chill. "Would you like a fresh pot of tea, considering this one has gone cold?" he asked solicitously, flashing her what she suspected was the first genuine grin she'd ever received from him.